want to welcome you all. I'm very happy to moderate this very high-skill panel this afternoon. Media and tech, a brave new world. I think how brave the traditional players will have to be facing this new world might be one of the topics we'll talk about. And I want to start with you, Alexander, since the traditional players are certainly looking at a very uncertain future. Where do you think are we heading, and is our ORF prepared for what's coming?
In the morning when I came here, I thought we were 100% prepared. After learning how tremendous the changes in other industries we have seen from mobile, retail, and so different other industries are changing, it reminds me that really also the change in the media industry will be much more than we have expected. And of course, I have one thesis that is very important, that in this dramatic change of the media world, you need a strong public sector. And for us, the question is how to organize and how to prepare public service broadcasting for the future. And then I also, yesterday at our dialogue forum, we had the chance to discuss with Jeff some of his hypotheses. And one thing which we also in the previous panel learned, that we have not only to face the usual challenges, how to serve the audience, how to reach the audience, how to either to cooperate or build a counterforce to platforms like Google, YouTube, or Facebook. We have one very new challenge. That is that medias are a platform for manipulation and infowar. And our question, which wouldn't have been a question, I think, on a similar panel 1 or 2 years ago, is to which extent, and it might be a question, Donald Trump is a result of that media war, Brexit is a result of that info war, or the results of AfD is partly a part of this info war, and how traditional media, if private or public service, would react on that. Do we have the proper means in our newsrooms to find out that manipulation is working, that we can make things transparent, and third, how to react then. So this, beside the many other facts I could present to you where we are prepared, is something which we really have to discuss very carefully and maybe find out in this panel some more.
Yeah, I'll ask about how prepared we are. I just want to ask each one of you a short outlook to the future. Kai, being you were part of the traditional media player, are we still at a point where we can change our business models to be prepared, or are we just going to be swallowed up by the new players? One is sitting right next to you.
It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about our core competence about journalism, the new digital world is a great chance for us, because we can tell our stories in a totally different way. We've got very new tools, and we can reach a much bigger audience than we could actually reach on paper. It's a necessity as well, because we don't meet the young audience anymore physically at the kiosk. They don't go there. They don't grow up on and with paper, and that's why we have to go somewhere else. But to give you an example, to be able to, for example, reach with a newsprint like Bild, young people at the age of 15, 16, that would have not been possible in the old world. So regarding and looking at journalism, looking at reach, we are as successful as we have never ever been before. On a monthly basis, we've got now something like 36 million contacts in Germany. This is the biggest reach of the brand of Bild ever in history. Much bigger than even at the highest point of our circulation in the early 80s, when we sold like 5 million copies a day of the Bild newspaper. The challenge is the business model. And this is the big problem, and this is where I am not sure what we have to do, but the old business model, simply relying on revenues and relying on advertisement, this doesn't work nearly as good as it does in the old world. And I think this is something which is a challenge for Facebook and Google as well. Just to give you numbers, looking at all the digital advertising money that was spent in 2016, over 60% of all that money worldwide was taken by Facebook and Google. At every euro of digital advertising money growth last year, 95 cents were taken by Facebook and Google. And this is our problem that, of course, we've got a big reach with our stories, with our content on Facebook and other social media platforms, but we can't monetize it as good as Facebook and the others can do it themselves. So Facebook is monetizing our content much better than we can actually do it. And this is one of the big challenges, because how can we survive if there's no economic basis for financing journalism?
Andreas, do you see yourself as a competitor or as an ally?
Well, the fact that I'm sitting in between Alexander and Kai and not over there might give you a hint on my answer. No, we regard ourselves as a partner of media, for the fact that our offer is quite complementary to the offer of traditional media partners. So give you a couple of examples. We are very strong in the young audience. So that's the reason why especially broadcasters team up with us to reach an additional audience. Like, we see quite a lot of that in Germany with ARD and ZDF. We are glad to hear that also ORF will launch or is applying for launching a YouTube channel. We have seen many commercial broadcasters heavily leaning into our ecosystem because of the additional audience. And with the additional audience, there's additional revenues attached, which are advertising revenues. There are different ways of engaging. As I said, if you talk about public broadcast, it's more about the additional audience and the interaction with that audience. If you think about commercial broadcasters, there's a business case behind it. And interestingly, that business case is not only limited to their original content, like broadcast content. If you look at what ProSieben is doing, German broadcast, and what RTL is doing, they have been buying more or less into the ecosystem, which consists of many, many creators, people who started as amateurs and then become professionals and made a business out of that. And there were companies who added a business layer to that. And many of the big broadcasters bought themselves into that ecosystem, which I think is a fascinating developing. And they started merging both worlds. You see YouTube creators appearing. Well, there was a big series on Build, if I remember correctly, featuring YouTube creators there. You see quite a lot of YouTube creators in TV shows. You see also TV shows becoming suddenly social media stars. So both worlds are merging, and we see ourselves as a partner in that game.
And they're giving you the relevance that you were looking for. I remember when we met 3 years ago at a summit, I was really surprised to hear you say that it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality that you're looking for as YouTube. You need more relevance. Is ORF maybe giving you relevance?
Well, quality is a question from which point of view do you define quality? So we quite radically define it from, from a user point of view. So what matters to the user, which is quite interesting that you see quite a lot of development in the ecosystem. Give you an example, Germany, which is kind of next door. The top YouTube channel by subscribers in Germany is Free Kickers. It's a soccer channel, but not with traditional soccer content, but with do-it-yourself videos. The second largest channel in Germany is a science channel. It's called In a Nutshell, kurz gesagt, which explains you the world in quite simple words, which is, we didn't kind of contribute to that. That's just a development. If there's a supply of quality content, there's also a demand. And we are seeing similar movements in Austria as well, with quite interesting creators, personality, and also the companies are emerging in this scene.
So Jeff, what's your take on this? Can they really work together, or?
Oh, we have no choice but to, because that's where our public is. I mean, I think we see a theme already. As Kai said, Facebook can get more money out of this than we can because they know people as individuals, and they give, to the next point, relevance in ways that we can't in mass media. In mass media, we still treat everybody all the same. That's what the internet killed, with it our business model, with it our notion of the mass. So what we have to learn from Facebook and Google and YouTube and so on is how to interact with people in an entirely different way. We have skills to learn. So far, I think the platforms have been so eager, thanks to our friends in Germany, to make friends among media, that they've tried to support our existing models. But we have these new skills to learn, and we've got to learn how to, with Datenschutz protected, how to know people as individuals so we can serve them with greater relevance, serve them with greater value, explore new revenue streams, support our journalism in new ways. This is a long path. I'm optimistic about it, but it's going to require a lot of investment and development.
And actually, we can't blame Facebook on that. It's a question of fair regulation. Looking at data protection, for example, the colleagues from Facebook, they even offered us to look into their data, and we have to say no, thank you. Due to German and European data regulation, we can't use this data.
So do you think that's good or bad regulation?
I think we simply have to have the fair rules, and we have to play to the same rules. And it can't be that Facebook is able, because of a different regulation in the United States, to use the same story to target a customer better than we can do it with our content. And this is where we have to find a fair basis. Talking about Google and Facebook and the other social media companies being our competitor or our partners, we always call them frenemies. They are neither friends nor enemies. They are something in between. They are great in giving us this infrastructure that we never had before. Just to give you an example, Bild has always been a newspaper brand. We were never in TV business. We were never able to buy a TV station. We tried, and as you know, competition board in Germany said no because of the market share of Bild.
More regulation.
More regulation, you can't get any TV station. Now with Facebook Live, suddenly we've got a new chance. Suddenly now we are the disruptors. It's now our chance with our content to disrupt classical TV stations. But they don't have to think about and bother about any economics, because they have got all that great tax money that makes sure that they will survive the next 3 decades.
But we still have a lot to worry about. We still have a lot to worry about, especially...
I mean, and the situation in Austria, coming from Germany, about all your, how do you say, Pressförderung, is very different from anything else I know from anywhere in the world.
But we still have a lot to worry about, Kai.
Can I come, by the way, as a German to Austria and found a newspaper here and get Presseförderung as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
You could, yeah.
So that's what you're going to do next, huh?
But
You could try.
We already have quite a few newspapers. So I don't know.
what I don't understand is talking about Presseförderung, which is really a unique tool. Why is it only for newspapers but not for online businesses?
So I'm really not responsible for that, but as far as I understand, they want to change the system that it could also be applicable for digital products of press. But of course, I also see the question, because in Austria we have the tendency, but unfortunately there are no other partners from the Austrian market here, that we have a public service model which is working quite well, also compared to other countries in television and radio and online. And we have the tendency of our private media or commercial ones, television and the press, also to become a little bit public service media by receiving a lot of Presseförderung or Medienförderung, etc., which, if you think it to the end, would not the proper answer to the problems of the media development, because in the end you would end up with an entirely public service system for all media, which cannot definitely not be the future. The future must be, I think, that it's part of the European success model that you have strong public service media from Great Britain to the Scandinavian and German-speaking countries, for example, but also a strong commercial media sector. And the question is how we could survive together by cooperation. One thing which is important is that we lower the barriers for cooperation between public service and private sector within Europe. Second is then which guidelines there are to secure, as Kai said, a level playing field for European media compared to the challenges from the Bay Area. And this is important in all that picture. the increase of the Presseförderung is a small part of it.
Jeff seems to agree to what
but
Alexander's
what
saying,
is
sorry.
important concerning our business models? I think we have a lot of discussions also internally that we should be present with our contents on YouTube, Facebook, etc. But we should not rely on these platforms because we cannot benefit from the income which those platforms agree. YouTube has a model. Facebook doesn't even have a model yet where if you put your content there, they monetize it, you get something back. They only started. But at the end of the day, what they do, they control, as you said, the data, they generate the data, and they generate the benefit which will come out from the data. So what I think is that cooperation, yes, but not give up our own destination sites. For example, ORF On is the biggest Austrian destination site. We reach very high numbers of people every day on this platform, and being present on Facebook can only be in addition to that, but should not replace our own sites.
I think
you agreed, even though you come from a structure that is completely different.
Completely different. And I'm quick to say that I would not endorse public media in the United States, given who would be in charge of that right now. But it works here. But I think it's a shame that public and private media have gone to a bit of war with each other, where especially in Germany, ZDF and company are prevented from innovating. And I understand why private media wanted that.
They are not prevented from innovating. They are prevented from innovating being tax funded.
Okay, so let me.
If we compete with the public sector on the same platforms, and we have to compete not only then with Facebook itself and with tax-funded public sector, then there's no chance for the private sector anymore. Why couldn't they give up, for example, simply going into advertising? Simply give up the advertising money and leave the advertising money to the private sector. Would be, for example, an example. Being tax-funded, they don't need advertising money. But why do they have to take both?
Let's go farther. Let's go farther for a second.
Yeah? We find an agreement. How are we going to...
So here's what I would argue public media needs to be. It needs to be an open source platform for the health of the entire media ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right? So what if public media was able to exist and innovate, but also make that open source so that private media benefits from that innovation, creates platforms, technology, content, and distribution that private media could benefit from, then you're collaborating together rather than saying, I'm going to stop them from doing things. At some level, is it possible, Kai, to see a model in which the success of public media can also be the success of private media?
Can we agree to disagree? Because this is leading somewhere else, I think.
Okay.
Well, I interrupted Alex to try to answer Kai's point.
No, we're running out of time.
Yes, we don't.
No, you're the boss. You're my boss.
No, right now he's not the boss.
You are the boss.
And
I'm
you
the boss.
should enjoy
So
the
I'm not-
situation. Use it.
I am.
It doesn't last.
Just one sentence concerning Kai Diekmann's argument. RAD and ZDF have no advertising in the online sector. Nevertheless, you just said that 95% of the growth in the online advertising sector is going directly to Google and Facebook. So this is the problem, and not if there is a presence of public service media. But so then I stop.
Another panel.
Perfect. We'll have lots to talk about afterwards. As a journalist, I'm affected by this whole info war and the fake news, and I really want to know from you, Jeff, your take on this. How do we confront this as journalists? It's incredible. I've been on air only for 4 years, and I've seen the decline. I've been confronted so often with spreading fake news, or they say that I do that. How can we? Is there a cure, or what are we supposed to do?
Let's first call it misinformation, disinformation, not fake news, because that's been co-opted and used by other forces.
Good point.
Again, I'm sorry. As an American, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Second, what I've come to see is that this is about manipulation.
Yeah.
It's about manipulation of us in media and manipulation of the platforms. There's a great think tank in New York called Data and Society that put out a great report about the manipulators. I also read NATO's Handbook of Russian Information Warfare, which I recommend. It is incredible.
I read it. It's really
it's amazing.
Incredible.
There's a RAND report about the Russian disinformation fire hose. What we see, I think, is that if we try to see this fake news as a commodity that we can camp out, we can make Facebook stop doing it and YouTube stop doing it, that won't get us anywhere. We should do that, that won't get us anywhere. What we have to realize is we have to see the manipulation before it occurs. We have to see it in the depths of 8chan and 4chan and to a lesser extent now Reddit. And then we have to develop, as journalists, new strategies. Because what happens is we're being used. We in media are also being used. When someone makes memes about Hillary Clinton being ill, and yeah, she got ill too, but when they do that, it starts in the dark recesses of the web, it goes up through Breitbart, it ends up on Fox News, and then CNN says, well, they're talking about it, so we have to do this. Thus, the manipulators set the public agenda. So part of the hard part I think we have to deal with as journalists is whether or not we practice some measure of strategic silence about this, which is very hard for us as journalists to not say some things because we know it came from a source of manipulation. I don't know what the answer to that is. No, I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to ask very tough questions about our role in this process of manipulation.
I feel very uncomfortable about this discussion. First of all, even if we call it misinformation or whatever, who is going to set the standard? What is misinformation? What is information?
Journalists, don't we? Isn't that our job?
You know, I would say, for example, I don't know who's going to decide it. Do we want Facebook to see itself as a media company? No, they're not a media company. With all respect, you're a data and an advertising company.
Yes.
If I talk to the Bundeskanzler Kern today, who is having an election campaign here, he probably would have got a different view on misinformation than I do as a journalist regarding some facts that are spread about him. So this is a very difficult situation to decide what do we want to see on these platforms and what we don't want to see.
But what about in our own publications?
For example, looking at cultural differences. There are content that is not allowed in America that is, you know, of course, fine over here in Europe. So even with these cultural standards, we will have problems of what kind of content we will see. There's one problem, and this is the algorithm of the news feed and the character of misinformation. You know, all these, again, fake news like the Pope is supporting Donald Trump, or Donald Trump is rescuing soldiers from Afghanistan with his own private plane. They are much more attractive. These kind of news are much more attractive than, you know, a report about, I don't know, the environment problems in Nigeria. So this kind of content that is so attractive is by the algorithm getting a lot of support and a lot of visibility. And this is the deeper problem of the news consumption and content consumption nowadays on a platform like Facebook, which is so important. It really turned the way we consume content upside down. The way we grew up, you know, was with fixed information rituals. We learned to watch TV at night and we read a newspaper in the morning. And we knew how to decode a newspaper. We knew how to find content that is interesting for us. We knew how to make a hierarchy of content. In the algorithm world of Facebook, it is totally different. Kids are not looking up, or consumers are not looking up content, but the content is coming to them. And only the content that is coming to them is relevant for them. And this is a very dangerous thing because, you know, it puts them in a kind of echo chamber where this kind of content is being more and more visible. And this is where I'm really worried. How are we going to organize in a society a discussion about topics that are really relevant to us, but don't reach a mass audience anymore?
Well, how do we do that? Like,
Honestly,
is there a solution?
We need to take our journalism to the people where they are. So we have to stop thinking we're always a destination and that everyone has to read articles. We've got to make journalism as a service in more forms on those platforms and take it to where the people are, whether we like them being there or not.
I was really impressed by the New York Times saying after Trump won, they said the problem was that they only wrote about the Trump voters, but they did not speak to them. So maybe that's
part of it. Part of it is listening. We've got to be better at listening.
Kai, as a German, I'd like to ask you, because it was mentioned before, manipulating. We know the US election was manipulated, or we can be pretty sure.
I think that's too easy to say the US election was manipulated.
There was manipulation in the election.
There was.
Yes.
We know that. Do you think there's a possibility that the German election was manipulated as well, at some degree?
As in every election, as we had this for years before, I mean, there's been misinformation for decades. It has always been a tool of political combating. Now it's you have the chance to reach a much bigger audience, and of course, as we know nowadays, there has been attacks in that election campaign, but the outcome of that campaign, to blame it to any Russian troll company, would be much too easy. Right. I mean, neither Mr. Orban was elected in Hungary because of manipulation, neither the Peace Party in Poland. It's a society trend, obviously, that something is going wrong, that there's this rise of populism. But just to link it to misinformation would be much too easy.
But for sure, I think we can agree that information is being used as a weapon, no? There's a weaponization of information. How do you, Andreas, make sure on your platform that it's not being used as for weaponization by, right-wing people, terrorists, etc.?
Well, when we talk about whatever we call it, fake news, mismatched news, working for a company always strives to provide the right answer to a question. Giving the wrong answer with false information is not in our interest. However, we learned today that the problem is quite complex, because the question is what is right, what is wrong. Exactly. So many points of view. And we as a platform are not in the position to decide what is right and what is wrong. So the things we can do, of course, we can adapt our products to make sure that whatever has been recognized as right might be surfaced in a better way. So what we do, we work in Germany, especially around the election, to give you an example, with outside companies who check news, the corrective first draft, you probably heard about them, who then send a letter to journalists, tell them what they think is wrong news. Which is, I think, something very good. What is important, I think, are two things. One is providing choice, because when you don't know what is right and what is wrong, at least you need to provide choice, that people can make up their minds themselves. So this is what we do at YouTube. We work with many news partners because we want to provide choice. And this is why I also encourage, especially the traditional players in the news sector, who quite often refrain from being active on this platform, make yourself heard, be present there. Make yourself relevant, engage with the people, because by that you have better chances to be heard and influence and make a stance. We also have launched, you can only speak for YouTube here, we also have launched products where we work with trusted sources, that's how we call them, to better surface their content on YouTube. We have a program called the Breaking News Shelves, where we work with partners who are part of the Google News initiatives. And in case a breaking news event happens, which is something enormous, big elections, etc., we offer on the YouTube homepage, currently not in Germany, but in the UK and in the US, a section where we surface videos from these trusted news partners to become a more meaningful answer to questions. But as I said, it's something in debate and ongoing.
Yeah, and you suggested a threat officer for all newsrooms around the world.
We've got to become savvier about the manipulation that occurs of us. That's why I mentioned in my discussion with Patrick Walker that I think that the platforms and media companies, particularly the platforms, need to reveal the efforts to manipulate them, because that is an effort to manipulate us. And we need to share this among media companies and platforms so that we can recognize what's happening better and how we're being used. It's a very complex task, but at the end of the day, it is our job as journalists to call bullshit, and we need to be better prepared to do that.
Obviously, a lot of people are not impressed anymore if we as media say bullshit. I mean, that is the other reality and the other truth about the new social media platforms, that people who really can use this infrastructure, they can communicate directly with their audience. You know, Donald Trump, 15 million followers. Taylor Swift, like 300 million followers over all platforms. In former times, you have been editor-in-chief of People magazine. Nowadays, you are editor-in-chief at Taylor Swift, who's got, I think, about 30 editors that are creating her life on a social media platform. And this is the other reality. Trump even doesn't give a shit what classical media brands write about him, and they do all the reporting. They did everything they could do, and he only used traditional media, even online, to fuel his direct communication. And this is the other truth we have to recognize, that our time as gatekeepers, checking, and it's simply over.
This is very depressing. Why are you applauding?
No, it's not.
It's not?
But it's a reality.
Well,
and I simply have to accept a new reality.
Yes.
In former times, you needed a printing press and you needed a TV station to reach a mass audience. This infrastructure is there nowadays. It's called Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and everything.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to live with that reality.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a huge
But
transformation,
nevertheless-
which is very exciting also, and very a big challenge. We need to come to an
But
end.
he's going to be
So
the
maybe-
boss again in a minute, so I'll let him talk.
But nevertheless, also Donald Trump was mainly a TV figure,
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
which then in the combination with his online activities became so strong. And still, at least we in Austria reach 90% of the Austrian population and even 80% of the younger ones with one of our information tools in television, radio, or online a day. So it's not the situation to be too depressed. However, we have this changing situation and we have to find instruments how to react on that. And we have set up a platform just some days ago, Fact or Fake, where we tried to find out in the running election campaign, which, together with the technical university, which fake news are broadcasted in the net and how they are distributed. And we found out it's not so much that there are so many obvious fake news facts put into the net, it's more how the distribution works. That very few fake news are distributed 100,000 and 1,000 times, and by this they get the pressure. And so what we can do is to have instruments, at least, to analyze for ourselves who works it, and then maybe also find tools to inform the public about what is going on. So it's more a question of transparency, and this is also important if we talk about cooperation with the Facebooks and Twitters, which are the main sources, YouTube to a lesser extent, for this distribution of the fake news, how the algorithms work. Because, of course, with all this, as Kai also said, fake news distribution, you can earn a lot of money because it's a big part of the usage. So the question is, how also to make this transparent and at least have some means to inform the public, not everybody, but the public in general, and to formulate a journalistic position in this situation.
Well, yeah, I can only thank you. I think we have to come to an end. Thank you for the lively discussion. And yeah, as Kai said, it's not depressing. It's challenging times,
Yes,
which is
yes.
really good. It's exciting times. Thank you.